Oh, dinosaur kisses. He's so cute. Hey everybody, this episode of Suspenders of Belief is brought to you by Yoshi Chow, now with 30% more mammals.
Hey, I'm Travey.
And I'm Heavy.
And today we're going to talk about the Super Mario Brothers movie, but not just any version of the Super Mario Brothers movie. No, a fan edit that is dubbed the Morton Jankel cut. Apparently some old footage has been cut in that was discovered and re-edited in place. In case you haven't seen this movie at all before, it's a little movie about a couple of Brooklyn plumbers named Mario and Luigi who are transported to another dimension after their new friend Daisy seems to be kidnapped. Can they save their friend Daisy and thwart Koopa's evil plan on merging the dimensions and taking over the Earth?
Well, it's hard to talk about this movie because we're essentially going to have to be talking about two separate movies. The original Super Mario Brothers film, which we saw as children, that came out in '93, and now, like you mentioned, the Morton Jankel cut, which has all this old footage that's kind of been reworked into it, and clearly the editors had some fun with it. There was some music that did not belong in the original, or maybe it was supposed to be and it got cut. There's a lot of questions we'll have gray areas on where we won't really have any definitive answers. All we can really talk about is the specific version that we watched today.
There was a lot of the temp tracks that were in some of the deleted footage. I don't know if that was just something that the editor put in, like the 2021 editor put in, just to have it as something, or if it was placeholders that were used in 1993 just until they got the original score in, because it seemed like it was all Alan Silvestri music from other movies that they had worked on, even down to like clips from Roger Rabbit.
I suppose we did all we could. Now what?
Talking about original intent with this film is also really difficult. If you know any of the backstory with the behind the scenes on the filmmaking, this was a train wreck, inside and out. Everything about the Super Mario Brothers. Their script was being constantly rewritten. The day of, entire scenes were changed, and it was a nightmare. And everyone who was involved with the film, all the actors, all the principal cast, they hated it. Both John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins said that they had to drink regularly just to get through the day. And Bob Hoskins actually was injured and broke his hand at one point. It was just a miserable, awful experience. And both of them have said that this was the biggest regret of their filming careers. So it's weird to think about when you're watching this movie just how awful and miserable it was for these two actors. And it's really unfortunate.
There were apparently like multiple scripts, like multiple people took a pass at it. There was lots of different intervention. I believe it was the first time it was a husband and wife team that directed it. I believe it was their first film. They didn't garner any respect from any of the people on set, any of the actors or anything like that. So there's a lot of pushback with that. I just kind of feel bad for them, for everybody who was trying to, even the directors trying to make sense of this, because I don't think they had a lot of help. I obviously, there was very little input from Nintendo at the time. And this movie did so poorly that Nintendo has yet to try to pursue any kind of film adaptation of any of their properties until we believe most recently, I think Illumination is producing a fully CG animated Mario Brothers movie. At this point, kind of nice, like, okay, let's see what we can do. But this was the gold standard, so to speak, of video game movies for a long time.
It got completely outclassed by Mortal Kombat just a couple of years later.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, the problems with the behind the scenes really lead into some of the other problems with the tone, the script, the dialogue. You have a lot of just inconsistencies and things that don't feel right. And again, we watched an extended cut, and so there were some things that were properly set up and paid off that in the standard edition of Super Mario Brothers, they're unanswered. There's a scene where the cousins of Bowser, well, he's not called Bowser.
He's Koopa.
Koopa.
He's really bizarre.
There's a scene where the cousins are talking to Koopa, and they are accused of trying to incite insurrection against Koopa.
Iggy and Spike have been preaching your overthrow of the Boom Boom Bar.
Really? I am very disappointed in you, cousins.
And in the standard cut, it's just a line, and it's like, what are they talking about? This didn't happen. And then in this version we watched, there's a whole rap number.
You ever get the feeling you're an automatic pilot? You're going through the motions like waves in the ocean?
That life is a series of brainless notions.
That's just one of those little moments that clearly that was lost in the editing.
That had to have been frustrating for those actors to go through the whole process of learning that damn rap and getting the choreography right and getting up on stage and doing the whole thing, just to have it cut right out.
My favorite little bit that was completely cut, though, was the pizza joke, because for years, ever since I was a child, I've always wanted to know what's with the pizza, because several times they referenced the fact that Koopa's ordered this pizza.
Python Pizza here, may I help you?
King Koopa here.
Oh, yes, sir.
I'd like the Koopa special.
Pterodactyl tail on that?
Yes. Dino, lizard, hold the mammal, no worms, and spicy.
Sir, your pizza's here.
Not now.
And then at the very, very end, after Koopa's been turned to slime, there's a pizza delivery boy who throws it at the puddle of slime.
Eat this!
Yes, a payoff. This stupid pizza joke actually did have a setup and a payoff. I couldn't believe it.
I mean, it's a nothing joke and it's unnecessary, but why cut that out? Like, if you're going to cut out the punchline, then cut out all the setup, unless they just couldn't for some reason. I didn't notice if it was like too ingrained into the set.
One of the most powerful changes that it made is, even as a child, I hated the dumb little 2D cartoon animation, because this movie came out when I was 5, by the way, and as a 5-year-old, I was offended. I thought that the dumb little, "Oh, gee, I sure love being a dinosaur. I sure hope nothing bad ever happens," whatever the heck their dialogue is. Again, luckily it wasn't in this version.
You know, it just don't get no better than this.
Yeah.
Is so painful and just awful. I was so happy that that is not how this movie opens at all. It's actually a great throwback to the classic style of like old dinosaur movies from like back in the 50s and 60s. Having this more serious, more somber, like, oh, look, dinosaurs. It was cute and childish, but in a wonderful sort of way. And maybe they just thought it was too dated. Maybe they thought that, like, oh, young kids aren't going to want to watch this black and white claymation, stop motion animation. Like, I just felt so much more appreciation for the work on this opening as opposed to the animated one.
I remember it looking kind of pixelated, like they were trying to emulate video game graphics, because as a kid, when I watched this, I remember thinking, oh, it's going to start looking like the video game graphics. And in my head, I've just kind of put that together, and I don't think that was necessarily intentional, but it's hard to tell.
A long, long time ago, the Earth was ruled by dinosaurs. They were big, so not a lot of people went around hassling them.
The best thing that I would say about it is, like, it's a fun thing to look at because it's black and white stop motion footage of dinosaurs, but it also has no dialogue. It just shows dinosaurs, it shows a meteor hit, and then boom, credits. There's nothing explaining it. So there's obviously a certain point they didn't trust the audience to put it together.
This movie is far too liberal with interpreting its material. There's no defense of that. There are a couple of clever little nods that I'm a big fan of Mario Brothers. I have in my whole life. So things like character references and signs, where you see Bullet Bill, where you see the Thwomp building integrated into the world. Like, those are fun. Those are nice little, hey, notice that in the background. They're not integral to the plot, but they're not like the Ba-Bomb.
Most of it is texture. Most of it is just something to literally dress the set to make it feel like it's tied into the source material. You have to be careful with references. Like, if you're referencing the source material, you can do it in a way where enriching what you're watching, but it could also be like, remember this? We did this and we put this in the movie. And there's some of these references are like that. Like, remember Thwomp from the game? We hung Thwomp on the wall. It's a tough balance to try to do that. And a lot of what they pulled from the game and interpreted is just incorrect. Like Big Bertha, it's like, oh, we're going to put Big Bertha in the movie. Oh, so you can be like, fish? Well, no. She's a lady. Is she a fish lady? Like, no, she's just a big lady. It's like, okay, then why even do that at all? I don't know. At that point in time, Super Mario World had come out, but I don't know if it had influenced this movie at all. It strikes me that it was probably written after Mario 3, maybe, which was like 88, 89 in America. It was still odd, some of the things. And some of it's like, Mario Brothers is not written for a narrative. It's written from a more creative and functional video game perspective. Like, the fact that Mario has a mustache was just to give the sprite some other detail to differentiate it. Oh, that's his face. So a lot of stuff that's in Mario Brothers is just like for the functional sake of simplifying something for a game. It's not really meant to be a story. So there was going to be a lot of crazy interpretations of that. And I'm less negative on that. I feel like, oh, that was, what are you going to do? You're going to do something. But I would be negative about, well, you just threw that in there for the sake of, remember this? And it's like, yeah, but do something with it. Don't just throw it in the movie.
And this is one of those changes that when it falls into creativity, there was a lot of audio cues. There was Mario sound effects, there was pipe sound, there was Mario music, and I don't know what's in the original and what's been added to the cut because they're integrated really well. They weren't distracting, but I just kept catching them and thinking like, oh, that's Mario music. Oh, that's a Mario sound. I know those. And I guess a general audience wouldn't have even noticed them at all. But then there are a lot of scenes where when they first get to the big cityscape, it's the big set piece of the film, and it's so quiet. It's basically just score and the main characters, whether it's Daisy screaming for help or Mario and Luigi talking. And it was really distracting because it's like, there are hundreds of people around. Surely it should be noisy and like hard to hear.
Plus, there was a lot of times where even before the scene changed, it'll be like original footage and you would hear somebody speaking off screen and then it would cut to the new cut and you would see that person that was speaking. They just kind of blended the audio over. So there was a lot of inconsistencies where you would hear background noise and then you hear nothing back and forth.
There were a couple of shots where we got to see the raw footage that had been spliced in with dialogue, and it was not very well recorded. You know, the dialogue was very difficult to hear. You could definitely feel the ADR presence where they're like, the scene's too quiet. They need to have them just saying something, put words in. They can't be just quiet for this long. Add some more dialogue. They need to be saying stuff. And you could definitely feel that where there were moments where a character would be saying something and the figures in frame would either not be responding to it or seem to be ignoring the character. And that was one of those, like, yeah, there's a clear disconnect from what you're hearing and what you're seeing.
What? Hi, Mario!
It seems again like they took a pass at it and like, this is like, we got to make this for kids. We can't have it too quiet, too boring. We've got to make jokes. We've got to have Mario saying stuff and Luigi saying stuff, and everybody's going to be funny. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot more ADR.
Right, I definitely had some Ghostbusters 2016 flashbacks.
Yeah.
The puppeteer work is phenomenal. And I know we started with the stop motion, Ray Harryhausen style. And then when you get into the then current day special effects and Yoshi, for instance, every time Yoshi was on screen, I was just like, oh, look at him. He's so great. Every time I saw him, I just was filled with so much joy. And I just wanted him to be on screen all the time. I didn't want to cut away from Yoshi. He was great.
A positive that I would put down the set design. They spent a lot of money on trying to make this place feel lived in. It was odd. It didn't really feel realistic. They put the fungus all over everything. They put the branding, the Mario's type branding all over everything. There's a lot of effort to make it feel like this is a different world.
You could definitely feel the more amateurish vibe from the directing on this movie because there were very, very few moments of directed photography. I remember at one point Koopa is coming up on a ledge holding his gun, and I was like, oh, this scene's not ripped from Terminator at all, where it just clearly looks like the scene in Terminator 2.
Come and get it, lizard brat!
But for the most part, yeah, the shots are very flat. It's very boring. There's not a lot of creative lighting. They don't do a lot with that. And it's Mario Brothers. It's a cartoon game. You could have done all kinds of crazy lights and whatnot.
It's the stuff that is fine for that is the real world stuff. Like when they're in Brooklyn, like that's fine because that's meant to be kind of grounded and it's not meant to be too fantastical. But like when you get to the Mushroom Kingdom, you could do whatever you wanted to with them. And instead it's still kind of even. But I would give definitely credit to the people who did the set design for sure. They're trying to build a world.
This movie gets most famously torn apart for things like, did they try to make a Goomba look as little as possible like a Goomba? Like you take this tiny little brown thing that waddles around to this giant henchman. And I do feel like if you just focus on like the little head, it looks like a Goomba to me. Like, I mean, it has obviously the giant stocky body underneath it, but just look at the little head. For me, it's like somebody deliberately was like, how can I work this weird little round shape into a character? I feel like there was at least some thought and creativity in that.
This movie's like that, where on the surface you're like, this is awful, but then you look like, somebody tried. Somebody, maybe not the director, maybe not Bob Hoskins, maybe not the Alan Silvestri, somebody at different points was really trying with this. Something that does strike me as deliberate about the Goombas. The Goombas have giant heads and tiny bodies in the game. And in the movie, they have giant bodies and tiny heads. I don't know if that was on purpose, or if that was just done to make us think and deliberately piss us off because they're not at all like Goombas. I don't know. But it's there.
Even though I know that Mario is the main character, the title is Mario Brothers. But to be fair, Mario definitely is the main character of the story. He's not the one who's trying to get the girl. That's very much Luigi's story. But Mario is the one who's got the real motivations, the real wants versus needs progression. Because Mario, in the beginning, we find out that him and his brother run this sort of struggling plumbing business. They keep being undercut by this bigger, like seemingly mafia-run plumbing company. They show up on a place that they've been called into, and there's another plumbing place there that's ripping them off, telling them it's going to take a couple of days. If we have the part, it's going to be expensive. Mario takes a look at the thing for 5 seconds, like, this will take 2 hours to fix. These guys are ripping you off. And even after being told this, the business is still like, oh, we're like to go with the other company, and Mario just like walks away. And again, that was a deleted scene. I can understand most of the scenes that were cut were definitely cut for time, and a lot of scenes were already in the film. They were just trimmed. But this is one of those little character moments that there were two things about it I liked. One, it kind of established that the Mario and Luigi are both underdogs, and they're both struggling in their day-to-day life. They're not super successful plumbers, they're just regular guys. So I liked that moment where like they're just trying to get by. They're not trying to be the richest people in the world, they're just trying to do an honest job. I like that. And then two, when one of the other plumbing people makes fun of Mario, he's all like, oh, Mr. Mario here is gonna solve your problem. And it was a great way that I thought at the beginning of the film establishes their name before it becomes a joke, because right away Mario Mario is his name, and he's teasing him about it. Because then later in the film, where they're like being booked, they have this unbelievably too long joke where John Leguizamo is trying to explain their names. Like, no, there's 3 Marios. It's Mario Mario and Luigi Mario. And it's
not funny.
And it's not funny. And in this version, that scene's longer. There's like another quick clip that's been added in.
Name? Mario. Last name? Mario. First name? Mario.
And it was already too long in the movie. And I just thought that moment of the other plumber teasing about his name was much better. You could cut out that other scene completely. This little, oh, Mario's going to stop us. Like, that was good. That's all I needed. I was happy with that. If that had been the only reference to their last name, I'd have been fine with it.
Do you think maybe it worked better because it was in the real world? Like, it was grounded?
I like the fact that Mario's not like, oh, it's an honest name. You know, we come from a proud Mario family. There's not any kind of integrity to it. It's being used in a dumb sort of way. And I guess I like it when a film or a game or a franchise can make fun of itself. And this is kind of a dumb thing where it's like, okay, yeah, his first name is Mario, his last name is Mario. That's kind of dumb. So the fact that it's kind of woven into the script that somebody's teasing him about his name, like, that's more natural.
Okay, look, how many Marios are there between the two of you?
There's 3. It's Mario and Luigi Mario.
Oh, like a Spaceballs joke.
Yeah. I did like the fact that it was there for kind of showing that these are the good guys. Like, they have some kind of moral compass where they're like, we're not going to rip these people off. Like, we're honest. We just want to do our job and go on. It makes me wonder if, like, that restaurant owner was, like, getting strong-armed or something. Like, you know, you're going to pay for our mafia operation on the side to get these plumbing jobs done.
You definitely had the implication, especially when the guy's like, so who are you going to go with? The Mario Brothers or the Scapellis? You know, it's one of those, like, it had some mob intention behind it.
Yeah.
So Mario's story throughout the film, and this is something that I tended to like and you tended to not like so much, but you had the faith versus cynicism. And I thought that cut scene was an integral part of Mario's story, because throughout the movie, he's such a cynic. He's kind of cold and he's kind of judgmental and closed off in his world, and Luigi watches the shows on the paranormal and the, you know, extraterrestrial, and he's more just open to new experiences and new things, and Mario's too closed off in his small world to even consider those type of, you know, fantasy elements. So then throughout the movie, there's constant little references like where Mario is being pessimistic or closed-minded, and Luigi is like, no, you gotta be optimistic. Anything's possible, Mario. And throughout that journey, that ultimately gets to the end of the film where Mario is ready to just like, you know what, whatever it is, I'm good to go. I believe in it. He's more forward-thinking and has more agency in his own life. And it was like, that was nice. That was a nice little circle for the story of Mario.
I bounced off of it, I think, because it was less about optimism and pessimism for me as much as it was like literally fantasy ideas. Luigi's all like, oh, I believe in this stuff. I believe in Bigfoot and UFOs and all this stuff. And Mario's like, you're crazy. And then they go through on their adventure. And at the end, Mario's like, I believe. And it's less about a crisis of faith or a personal change as much as, no, I've just literally seen this stuff. I know it's real now.
Ironically, you have a more cynical take on it.
But that's just how I am in general anyway.
You're taking the Constantine approach that like, once you die and go to hell, you can no longer have faith. You know hell exists. It's like you're taking more of that stance on it.
Yeah. I appreciate it that it's there and they didn't just slap it on at the last minute because it's right there at the beginning.
Right.
So it's definitely present and they owned it.
There are several lines of dialogue dedicated to Mario's lack of faith and Luigi's abundance of faith. So it was not something that slipped in or was forgotten about. If anything, it might have been a more integral part of the story that was cut down because it is right from the beginning to the very end essential to Mario's story.
This went through several different rewrites. So there's a possibility that in like the earliest version where that was included, it was a little deeper and it was a little more meaningful and it just got trimmed down and trimmed down and trimmed down to where it was just literally like, no, I believe because fantasy stuff has happened to us. When originally it was probably something more significant, but it's also us trying to give credit to 16 different versions of the script that have existed previously before this final product. So it's hard to tell what you can give credit to or not.
But Luigi definitely took the back seat compared to Mario, where Mario's agency was kind of, you know, adapting and changing throughout the story itself. Luigi was basically, he just wanted a girl. So his wants and needs were basically the same thing. He had a good life. You know, Mario provided for him. They weren't like living on the streets. They had an apartment. They obviously weren't the richest people in the world, but the only things he really wanted was a girl. And ultimately, he really doesn't get the girl.
It's true.
You know, it's not like you see him strolling down the street, arms around her. Like, she's still technically living in a different dimension.
He gets 2 kisses in the long version.
You could argue that maybe Luigi's wants versus needs were just to realize he doesn't need the girl if he really wanted to reach.
They at least gave him something to do because he could have just been regulated to just being a sidekick.
Right.
But he was a little bit of a Mary Sue, to use that phrase. I mean, it wasn't like everything he did worked out perfectly for him all the time, but he definitely was like well characterized by default. Like, he didn't really need an arc. He was, like you said, he's fine.
Right.
So they didn't need to do anything with him. One of the things that upon rewatching this, I was trying to remember if there was any conflict between the brothers, and there really isn't. They kind of argue back and forth, like the fate versus skepticism thing. That's there, but there's never like a third act, like, oh, the brothers are separated because they're fighting, and then they come together at the end to fight Koopa. That just doesn't happen in this movie.
I will say, thank God that's not in this film, though, because that's one of the most tired, contrived, Toy Story. Now you have to have Woody and Buzz have an argument that they're going to get over and get back together. Like, I hate that story arc. It's so overdone. So I'm happy that's not in this movie. Though I will say there was a quick line of dialogue that you caught where they're being arrested. And he's like, oh, you're a plumber. You come with me. He's like, oh, I'm not a plumber. He's a plumber. I'm just an apprentice.
Throws him right under the bus. Yeah.
Right. It's like, this is your brother. You're selling him out instantly to the cops.
It is one of the things that I did have in my notes, is that these guys actually seem to care about each other. There's lots of little bits where they seem genuinely worried about each other. And it's just nice. It's refreshing. It could have been written like entirely cynical and they're just jerks to each other the whole time. But there is like a legitimate bond. I appreciate that. There's even the bit like towards the third act, right before the third act begins, and they're sabotaging the air conditioning unit.
Treat your tools like a friend. Keep them by you. Never let them down, and they're always at your side.
There's a little bit of a bond there, and it's something with these characters rather than just like, we're going on a wacky adventure. Who cares about characterization? So you go into this with low expectations, and when you have that little bit like that, it's like, okay, there's something there.
The nice thing about that story arc of Mario, his redemption of faith, or just kind of like his agency in life, however you want to look at it, clearly it's setting up a sequel. And from what we know about the troubled production history, I guess there's no way that they could have had any kind of sequel in mind. But hypothetical, what would you want the Super Mario Brothers sequel to be?
I like the idea of give them 3 years so that they can release a sequel in time for 64, and it's co-developed with Mario 64, so they can do the bit where they're jumping into paintings or something.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Maybe lean into that, like that way the movie could be released in time with the game and have people like, oh, that's just like the game, and try to make it a little bit more authentic.
So I know that this is kind of a weird one for our normal how do you rate this movie, since this is a kind of a fan edit, so to speak, but if they did clean this up and put out a copy of it in the store, what would you pay for this movie?
That's a good question. Even though I would say I'm a defender of this one, I don't love this, but like a lot of people are crap on it. Like, it's an entertaining, weird mess of a movie. It's perfectly entertaining. I guess if I saw this fan edit, I'd pay $15 for a Blu-ray if I really, really wanted it. Like, it's interesting, especially if the Blu-ray was like, here's the original version, here's the edited version. You can watch them both back to back if you want. Like, that would be worth it. I wouldn't spend a lot of money on it because it's still fundamentally bad. Even the original version that is shorter, more concise, it's still not really that good. I have a DVD that I think I spent $3 on or something, so it's not that great.
Yeah, I do think that it's probably worth about $20. I would buy a $20 Blu-ray just because I did appreciate getting kind of to see more about it. I would love if the Blu-ray included some behind the scenes, some of the crazy turmoil stuff, just to get you like a real honest what actually happened. Have a documentary or whatever, just raw footage of some of that crazy shenanigans behind the scenes. I would like to see. I think sometimes the story behind a movie is more interesting than the movie itself, and this is one that if there's not a documentary on the Super Mario Brothers movie, there should be.
Shout Factory put out this version, put out the long version, the original version, as well as put out like a feature-length documentary on a nice Blu-ray. Yeah, I'd spend like $25-30 on that because it's fascinating.
I think we should take another look at the old Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, we've visited notorious video game adaptation. I think it's time to visit one that is usually lauded as the best video game adaptation. I'm going to say questioningly because maybe we'll find out if it is or not.
It'd be fun to see how it holds up because I have not seen it in a number of years, but I do have a lot of fond memories of it. So again, guys, next time on Suspenders of Belief, Mortal Kombat.